on LEADER. I think it's a very good initiative that you have this task force. We don't have this in many member states, and it's probably a very good ground to discuss the future design of LEADER in Italy. The presentation I'm giving, the slides, they are already a bit old. They are from November, from the last LEADER subcommittee of the European network. Since then, of course, things have been developing in the Council, in the negotiations with the other Directorates General of the Commission on the community-led local development approach. So I will try to link a little bit these rather technical slides, which are based on the articles of the current proposal, to the discussions we are currently having on the new period here. So this first slide here, I think Franco Mantino has already said everything on this. I don't need to explain anything further. By the way, I appreciate very much Franco's interpretation of things that are presented by the Commission. It always gives also us reasons to think about how things could be done. Well, this new community-led local development approach under the common strategic framework, and which has to be described and planned in the partnership contracts, is in fact nothing else but the LEADER approach, and even the LEADER approach and implementation, which we at DG Agri have thought of doing better in the next period. So this was rather accepted by the other Directorates General, and so this approach, it already exists as LEADER and also in the Fishery Fund, and it will simply be, let's say, also extended to the other funds, but under a common heading, which is the CSF. So at the moment, we know that local action groups from LEADER and the Fisheries Fund do already potentially benefit from the other funds when implementing their local development strategies, but not in a very coordinated way, of course, not even between those two funds, the Rural Development Fund and the Fisheries Fund, which are already working with this method. So the common approach for all policies, as it is now set out in the proposed provisions, should enable the member states and then further the territories and the LAGs to coordinate the integrated use of all the different funds under the common strategic framework for the implementation of their rural development strategies.
Delle strategie di sviluppo. Scusate, vi devo interrompere perché sento me ma non sento lui. Qualcuno lo può dire alla loro spazio?
It would be useful, of course. So the background is the common strategic framework, and that there we will have territorial development on sub-regional level as a cross-cutting issue for inclusive growth, which is one of the
ma io così non posso tradurre perché sento la mia voce e non sento lui.
Strategy. And in the legal proposals, and especially the common provisions regulation for all the CSF funds, the common strategic framework, they propose this common instrument and approach, which is based on a single set of rules. So there are several articles in this regulation, then complemented with policy-specific features.
Se parlo io sento me stessa, però.
What do we want?
Pedro.
Yes. Yes?
Just a minute, we have some problems.
Okay, I'll wait.
We can start again? Non si sentiva, non stavano traducendo, c'è un problema lì. Sì, io. Possiamo andare?
translation. I heard it was there and then it went away.
Okay. Pedro,
Yes.
will you start to talk?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it okay now? Should I continue?
We are trying.
Okay, so I continue. So it is about reinforcing multi-level governance through multi-funded local development strategies and a coordinated approach, and specifically also to improve the strategic choices at member state level as regarding local development. So, what are the legal provisions in the proposal? So we have 5 articles in the common regulation, and then for LEADER we have some specific articles in the proposal for the rural development regulation. It's very important to see them, let's say, together and to see how things are declined. Basically, there is a definition of the method, and in the common provisions regulation you will see that in the case of rural development it is still called LEADER, though we don't have the 7 LEADER specificities anymore in our regulation. It's something which we had to negotiate with the other funds, but we think that all the specificities are still there. There we also talk about the consistency and coordination between the funds for the community-led local development and the possibility to have a lead fund, but I will talk about this later. Then we have quite a specific article on the local development strategies, where you can see that we have put them back from our experience with LEADER, and which we had in the work of the focus groups in this period under the network, and also as a reaction to the report of the European Court of Auditors on LEADER. We have a bit more precise description of what should be in these local development strategies. And as you know, we have now also this new focus group on the local development strategies, and my colleague Judith from the contact point will later give a presentation on the state of play of this focus group too. Some elements about the selection procedure in view of the multi-funding, and then an article on the local action groups in the same line, our experience that we had and what we think had to be done better. And then the operations that will be supported are in Article 31, and then for this we needed for the Rural Development Fund some more specific elements in our regulation, which the other funds, well, at least the Regional Development Fund and the Social Fund don't have, because it's a new instrument for them and they didn't want to go more into detail. Let's see if this is a realistic approach later on. The colleagues from the Fisheries Fund, they have similar provisions to ours. So, if we look at the definition of community-led local development, it is focused on specific sub-regional territories, which should be rural in the case of LEADER, of course, but they can also be mixed with urban or coastal areas in a case of a coordinated multi-funded strategy. And in Article 29, paragraph 6, there we announce that there will be a delegated act from the Commission on the definition of areas and the population. Member states and other actors are waiting for us to explain what is behind, but what is behind is that we will say that what we expect from an area where a local development strategy will be implemented in terms of size and of population size and of a homogeneous area. We will be very flexible. It will be in the sense of what we have now for LEADER. So let's say, between 10,000 and 150,000 inhabitants. The difference is, of course, that it might not be only limited to rural areas. So there where you have currently in leader areas white spots because you took out some urban settlements, in the future this will be possible, of course, to have them in one strategy if funded by several funds. But then, of course, you will have to see if there are problems with the upper limit of 150,000. But still, I think we will allow for derogations of this limit too. Then, of course, the approach is community-led by local action groups composed of representatives of the private socio-economic interests and so on. So exactly as in LEADER, but we write very specifically that at decision-making level, neither the public sector nor any single interest group shall represent more than 49% of the voting rights. So this is something we have done following, let's say, the report of the European Court of Auditors here, who was very critical about the dominance of the public sector in LEADER. This any single interest group is a thing that comes from the fishery fund, and it's about, let's say, the fishermen and nothing else. I think for farmers we don't fear that they will dominate the local action groups. Carried out through integrated and multi-sectoral area-based local development strategies. And then a bit hidden, we have the local needs and the innovation, networking and cooperation in the last point of this article. Consistency and coordination between the funds. We ask for that, and that's, let's say, it's a minimum requirement, even if the strategies are still mono-funded, because you could imagine that, for example, the Rural Development Fund is able to fund anything, everything. Why should we then need, in a coherent rural area, also the other funds? This is a discussion you could have in theory. Of course, we would welcome multi-funded strategies, but this is possible. But even if there are only mono-funded strategies, there has still to be a consistency and coordination to the support of community local development between the funds as a guiding principle, because community local development in urban areas or in coastal areas should be implemented in the same way as it is in rural areas. And this consistency and coordination is has to be ensured through the coordination of capacity building of the actors. So you can see it's extremely important that already now the different managing authorities and ministries of the funds talk with each other to think about how they could provide this capacity building together. The selection and approval of the local development strategies. The more multi-funded approaches you have, the more this process, of course, has to be coordinated. And then, of course, also in the funding of the implementation of the local development strategies. And here we have a slide which is it's a bit complicated, and it has all the big questions in it for which we don't have specific answers yet, but we are working on that. So in case of multi-funded strategies, there we expect that the member state or the region, if it's done on regional level, establishes a joint selection procedure for the local strategies, and it's a joint selection committee. So this is what we expect, but as I said before, it's not a must, it's an option. Then we introduced the lead fund principle. The lead fund is just also an option, and it's a technical option. It's a technical option that if a strategy, a specific strategy, because that can be decided on the level at the moment when it is selected. Of course, a member state or region can already think about more, let's say, practical solutions beforehand, maybe, in order to make it more feasible. But, well, at the latest, in the moment of the decision on the selection of the strategy, the authorities could decide, together with the lag in a bottom-up, top-down communication, that one of the funds which will fund the local development strategy could be the lead fund, in the sense that all management costs, so we talk about running costs and animation and capacity building throughout the implementation phase, could be funded by only this fund. This is considered to be a simplification, a possibility to simplify things. We don't think that there should be a problem in, let's say, that the funds are in competition because of this. We have already heard that some said, yes, but if only our fund will pay for this running costs and animation, then it will not pay enough for the project and so on. But okay, this is not our problem in Brussels. This is something that has to be sorted out. It's also just a suggestion. What would be the lead fund? Normally, let's say, the fund that is leading anyway for the strategy, and which is the most important one as regards the activities foreseen in the local development strategy and the area in question. And then in the last paragraph, there is something on under which priorities the local development should be carried out. And there, of course, we have, as Franco explained, we have then declined different priorities, let's say, for the different funds, and where local development can then be applied. This is also something that has to be, that let's say, has to be further clarified, but in rural development, it's very clear that all of the 6 priorities are possible. Priority 6, of course, which is combating poverty, social inclusion, and let's say the rural economy, are of course the one that are maybe the most closest to LEADER, but this is up to the partnership contract and to the programs, rural development programs, operation programs to see. So this is a slide that was done by the colleagues of DG Regio to explain to people who have never heard anything about a local development strategy how this could look like. It's a bit simple. And I don't have to explain it to you, LEADER people, but whenever you want to explain this maybe to someone outside, you can see that potentially all the funds can be in the strategy with different projects funded by different funds, and this is what the strategies and what community local development is about. Coming to the specific article on the minimum requirements for the local development strategy, just to pull out some of the more important developments that we have in comparison to the current period. It is in point C, the clear focus on the objectives of the strategies, on clear and measurable targets for outputs and results. This is what the Court of Auditors has criticized LEADER for, is that he has found that there were local development strategies where as soon as they start to be implemented, they are somewhere in the cupboard, in the drawer, and we want to put the local development strategy back into the center, let's say, of the approach. This is very important. Another point is to show very clearly the process of community involvement in the development of the strategy, because also here we think there were probably some cases, and we would like to avoid that, where this community involvement was not very strong. And then there should be an action plan demonstrating how objectives are translated into actions. But we will not be more prescriptive than that. But still, we wanted to show that this should be part of a local development strategy. And this is for the focus group, I think, to elaborate on this and to give recommendations on that. Another point is a description of the management arrangements, so the implementation, so that it's very clear that everyone can see how is the implementation of the strategy managed, but also of the monitoring arrangements, because if there are clear objectives and outputs and results and targets and so on, then there has to be some monitoring. And I think throughout the different generations of leaders, this has in some member states been really a weakness, that such monitoring arrangements have not taken place because no one really asked for that, and there wasn't any, let's say, capacity foreseen. So we hope that in the future, without a lot of problems for the lags, such monitoring arrangements can be there, and also specific arrangements for evaluation. And here we talk about the self-evaluation of the lags and the implementation of the strategies. Last but not least, a financial plan of the strategy, also in view that if there is a multi-funded strategy, what could be the planned allocation for the different CSF funds. But well, this is then up to the process in each member state to decide on how to develop on all these points. The selection approval process, as I already said before, has to take into account the possibility of the multi-funded strategies, and has then, of course, to involve the different authorities. It is said in paragraph 2 that member states shall define criteria for the selection of local development strategies, which is very logical, and that fund-specific rules may set out selection criteria. We in rural development are not going to do it. Regional development and social fund, they are also not doing it because they are not going more into detail. But the fisheries fund, they want to avoid some of the problems they are having in the current period. So in their regulation proposal, there are some criteria already set by the Commission, but this shouldn't really be a problem, let's say, for the coordination in between the funds. Managing authorities have to set up the selection committee. In case of multi-funding, of course, the authorities responsible for the different funds. They have to find ways of who's leading the process, but we don't give any special indications on this. And then we say all the local development strategies should be approved by the end of 2015 to allow sufficient time for implementation. I think Italy is maybe not the only case, but there are many cases where we know that this could, of course, pose a problem. Having seen the presentation of Franco Mantino, you can see that already the timetable for the approval of adoption of CSF, approval of partnership contracts and of the programs and so on is very tight. So this is surely a point on which we have to reflect in our proposal very clearly if this deadline is feasible. But we think, at least at the moment in our discussions, that at least the first member states should try to have a first selection round of some groups by this this deadline, which is really important. We also have member states like Finland or the Netherlands who are always pushing very hard to start very early, of course. Then, yes, we have something on the coordination, that the decision to approve a local development strategy by the managing authority should set out the allocations of each fund. So it should be very clear for the local action group, for the territory, what kind of budget from the different funds is available. Of course, this cannot be set in stone, but it should be possible. It's of course very demanding on the level of coordination between the different authorities of the funds, but we think it's needed. And the role of the authorities responsible for the implementation of the relevant programs relating to the strategy has also to be set out. On the local action groups, we say very clearly, and this is maybe something where the other funds, which don't have the experience from LEADER with the approach, for them local development might be something else than we know from LEADER and what we now call community-led local development. And so the principle says very clearly that it's the LAGs, the public-private partnerships, that shall design and implement the local development strategies, and that the member states are responsible to very clearly define the roles of the LAG and the authorities for all implementation tasks. So this is something we also learned from the previous focus groups and from the Court of Auditors report, that it is very important that everyone knows which kind of implementation model is really used. And you know that there are several implementation models and that they are all valid in the specific context. But let's say this has to be very clear then, at least on the level, on regional level, it has to be clear how this works, and has to be fully compatible, of course, with the principles of community-led local development. Then there has to be a legally constituted structure. It can be the LAG itself, or at least a lead partner in administrative and financial matters. And then we come to a paragraph where we list the minimum tasks of the LAGs. And very important, that capacity building has to be possible and has to be done throughout the implementation phase of the strategy. It's not only something at the beginning. And then we have a point on the project selection procedure, which has to be non-discriminatory and transparent and avoid conflicts of interest and so on. And as you already know from what has changed during this period in the legislation for LEADER and in the update of the guide on the implementation of the LEADER axis, there have to be at least 50% of the votes. They have to come from the non-public sector partners, and there should be a possibility to a provision to provide for possibility of appeal against selection decisions, which is normally done under national law, and also allow a selection by written procedure. To be very clear, there are different ways, maybe even online or whatever, but it has to be clear and transparent. We are aware that this sounds very bureaucratic, takes a bit the lightness of our partnership operates and so on. But we had the Court of Auditors. We were very much criticized for not checking these things, and it's public money that is spent. So unfortunately, this is necessary. Then also to ensure the coherence with the local development strategy when selecting operations by prioritizing them according to their contribution to meeting the strategy's objectives and targets. So once again, as in the article before, a very clear link for each selection, project selection with the strategy. This is very important. And then I think the rest of the tasks are, let's say, quite natural things. Let's say we kind of fix the minimum requirements here for the operation of the local action groups. Now coming to the specific 4 eligible types of actions or categories of actions for community-led local development. So currently, you know that we have, well, running costs and animation as one submeasure, we have cooperation as one submeasure, and then we have the main measure for LEADER, which is the implementation of the strategies. So we added one new thing, which is the preparatory support, which takes place before the strategies are selected. So it can be open to, let's say, to everyone, to all the territories who would like to submit a strategy. That is, let's say, the novelty. We know that there are already some practical problems with this, because if this kind of support, preparatory support, is only possible from 2014 on, how should LAGs prepare their strategies in time? But for this, there are also possibilities under the current program, I'm sure. It depends on the individual case of the program. But here we said we thought that if it is let's say well organized, the preparatory phase is well organized, then it can really, let's say, help in terms of capacity building of the territories. And yeah, so, and we mirror these 4 actions in our rural development regulation, apart from the most important one, maybe, which is the implementation of operations under the local development strategy. So why that? Yes, well, in fact, this happened because, I mean, originally we had all these things foreseen in our own rural development regulation proposal, and then last minute we had to provide this for the common regulation, and in this way this kind of got lost. But what we want to say very clearly with this Article 31B, and there's nothing more on it, is that the implementation of operations under the local development strategies should not be restricted anymore to the implementation of standard measures, rural development measures of the program. So it is highly recommended to member states and regions to think about a specific design and to be creative, a specific design for LEADER in their rural development programs, and of course, if necessary, in coordination then with the other funds and their programs. So LEADER is something free now. Of course, there are rules, state aid, and so on, but I think this can be managed. So for the running costs and animation, we already say here at this place in this regulation that it can be up to 25% of the budget. You know that in the current period we have 20%. But even the Court of Auditors said that there was not enough animation work taking place in LEADER in many member states. So our proposal is 25%, up to 25%, of course. So now it gets a little bit complicated, and I don't want to go too much in detail with that, because personally I think we now, as we have the common approach on community-led local development in the common regulation, we might have some problems to defend what we had designed originally only for us, which is the LEADER Startup Kit as a special form of preparatory support. So this is something which is for territories who didn't have any previous experience with the approach and who think that maybe for them to participate in LEADER fully fledged is a bit too demanding. So we propose to member state to use a LEADER startup kit and to design schemes where throughout the whole period territories can test the LEADER method, and it is a kind of phasing in for the next period after 2020. So this is an option for the member states. You should very early, very clearly think about if you really want that or not, and what you think about it. You can imagine that this was not designed for a country like Italy with a long tradition with LEADER, and yes, this is the, let's say, the subdivision of the preparatory support on the level of rural development. You have the LEADER startup kit, and then the normal preparation of local development strategies before selection. So I think I will skip these slides because this might really get a bit too long. You can read it through. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Now to come back again to the implementation of the operations. The principle should be, in fact, that any operation funded under a local development strategy should only contribute to the priorities under the rural development objectives. So it's up to the program to have a specific design of what should be supported through LEADER, and the local development strategy should be at heart, let's say, of the eligibility of all the actions. So this is a very let's say, important novelty to get LEADER back into the place where it belongs. They should, of course, the rural development programs demonstrate then in this special design that innovative and integrated projects get preferential treatment under the eligibility rules. Because, of course, there are some member states who have made quite good experience with the LAGs implementing standard rural development measures via the LEADER approach. But of course, innovation and integration should always be taken into account here. So member states can also continue to use the measures, but they have to clearly go beyond the scope, the standard scope of the measures as regards LEADER. Well, then for the cooperation, we try to improve it a little bit. Unfortunately, there won't be any centralized financed transnational cooperation from the Commission in the future. It's not possible. So it will stay like it is. But what we have, we will be a little bit more strict with the member states, or we try to be a little bit more strict. For example, in the cases where the selection of cooperation projects is centralized, where it's not done by the LAG, but by a selection committee, which is run by the managing authorities, let's say these calls for applications for transnational cooperation projects should not be only once a year or twice a year, because we have seen that these projects then they cannot really take place if this is differently done in the member states. So we ask for a kind of ongoing application process, which doesn't have to be, let's say, really a continuous one, but it should be like every 2 or 3 months in order to facilitate the implementation of the project. We ask for the administrative procedures to be made public, probably then through the European network in the list of eligible coasts, so that the whole thing is transparent. And we ask for an approval of the transnational cooperation project no later than 4 months after the submission. And yes, well, these are the main points on cooperation. On running costs and animation, we are in the same way as we have done it in the guide during this period, more explicit on what is running costs and animation. We have already also foreseen to have some delegated acts with definitions, but I'm not really sure if we really need it. Yes, and then we have, as the only fund, we have the possibility to request the payment of an advance in the same way that we have it in this period for the running costs and animation. And this amount shall not exceed 50%, which is a bit more, of the support related to running costs and animation. Here I fear that we might still get a little bit of problems in the context of the, let's say, the multi-funded strategies. We will have to see. In the same way as for the co-financing rate, which are different between the Rural Development Fund and the other funds, unfortunately. But we have the highest ones in rural development, up to 80 or up to 90% in our proposal. And we are also the only fund, of course, where community-led local development is compulsory, as it was already said by Franco in his presentation. We will have, again, specific networking instruments for LEADER. They are in the proposal on the networking in rural development, both on European level and also on national level, something which most of the networks are doing anyway, but we have also cases where nothing is happening in terms of training activities and so on for lags. Then I have some slides which we had at the time in the committee from the other funds, where we also had representatives from the other from DG Regio, DG Employment, and DG Mare, and where they were allowed to explain what their incentives are, because there is no minimum, there won't be any minimum budget for all of them. And so under cohesion policy, so in the social fund and the regional development fund, community local development will be rather open under one specific thematic objective, which is promoting social inclusion and combating poverty. And as you can see, also Franco has already done some links, but this really still has to be developed further with the colleagues. And in the case of the ESF, there's even a dedicated investment priority. The proposal on the MF regulation was already adopted, of course, and they have specific objectives for local development strategies, which is to maximize the participation of the fisheries sector in the sustainable development of fisheries areas, and to ensure that local communities fully exploit and benefit from the opportunities offered by maritime and coastal development. They don't have a minimum budget, but at the moment they have in the fisheries fund 13% average allocation of the fund for their access 4. So they don't fear that they will have member states who will not be who don't want to take it up. So I think this is everything. There are, of course, many more questions that have already come up. We have also received from the Italian ministry in Rome a very long list of questions on both community-led local development and also in our regulation on specificities, with very, let's say, very intelligent and precise questions, but which we have not answered yet, because they were not part of, let's say, of the official ways questions are replied to in the Council Working Party on Rural Development, but we take them into account. And what we are doing at the moment is that we have an operational working group between the funds on community-led local development, and we are working on a common guidance document on community-led local development, which is already in progress and which we hope that we can already, let's say, partly present the drafts at the different events we will have on LEADER, on community-led local development, the different committees before the summer. And we promised in the Council Working Group on Rural Development that this document will then be presented to member states later this year, so only after the summer, later on in October probably. So this was my presentation. Thank you very much for your patience. Also, it was maybe a bit long. Should I pass directly?